There comes a time in every generation when silence must be broken. And today I speak not to glorify solitude, but to honor the silent warriors, those women who walk alone with no husband beside them, not out of rejection, but by the deep resolve of purpose. We are told stories of brides and wives, but not enough is said about the woman who stands on the mountaintop alone. Society watches her and whispers, "Why is she still alone?" But I tell you today, watch her not with pity, but with respect. For her path, though lonely, is not barren. It is filled with battles we cannot see and victories we dare not forget. Watch this speech till the end, not because her story is uncommon, but because it is far too common and still too misunderstood. For in her footsteps are lessons for every daughter, every mother, and every nation. There is a courage in walking alone, not the loud kind that shouts in crowds, but the quiet kind that chooses dignity over dependence. A woman without a husband is not a woman without love. She has simply not surrendered her destiny to the noise of expectation. Let us not measure her by what she lacks, but by what she carries. She carries the weight of judgment, yet walks with grace. She faces the questions of her worth, yet does not bow to them. She is not in waiting, she is in motion. She builds, she nurtures, she leads. And she does so not to prove anything to the world, but to stay true to her. There is no shame in walking alone, only strength misunderstood. She is not waiting for rescue, she is rising in purpose. And in her rise, she challenges the very fabric of culture that says a woman is incomplete without a ring. Her ring is resolve. Her vow is to her vision. And her union is with her destiny. Let us honor the women who walk alone, not as outcasts, not as leftovers, but as leaders of a quieter revolution. Because when a woman walks alone and still walks forward, she is not walking toward emptiness. She is walking into legacy. And to every woman listening, walk boldly, walk freely, walk fully, because your value was never written in the presence of a man. It was inscribed by the hand of destiny. There is a power that is rarely spoken of, one that does not come from crowds, nor from applause, nor from the warmth of companionship. It is the strength that arises when a woman chooses to walk alone, not because she was cast aside, nor because she was unloved, but because something inside of her said, "There is more to me than waiting." This woman walking in solitude is not weak. She is not incomplete. She is not a half waiting for her other half. She is a whole being standing tall in a world that tries to bend her with shame and questions. It takes courage to walk alone, especially when the world says you should not, especially when every voice, family, faith, and community asks you when you will settle, when you will submit, when you will surrender your freedom in exchange for approval. But this woman has chosen a different path, not an easier one, but an honest one. Her strength is not in rebellion, but in responsibility to herself, to her truth, to her God. Society has long praised women for being wives, for being mothers, for being the helpmate to a man. And these are noble roles, deserving of honor. But what of the woman who chooses the path not walked by many? What of the woman who rises each day with no hand to hold and still gets up with grace, still carries her dreams, still builds her future? She must not be pitied. She must be respected. For her strength is forged in fire. In moments when no one sees her, when no one affirms her, when loneliness knocks and she refuses to let it define her, she has learned to find companionship in her calling. She has discovered that love does not only come from a man, it comes from mission, from self-worth, from the quiet voice of heaven that says, "You are more than enough." We must be careful how we speak of her. For too long, cultures have labeled such women as difficult, proud, or cursed. But nothing could be further from the truth. She is not difficult. She is determined. She is not proud. She is principled. She is not cursed. She is called. And perhaps that calling has demanded her to walk alone for a season, not as punishment, but as preparation. For sometimes what lies ahead is so great, it cannot be shared with just anyone. It demands clarity. It demands focus. It demands solitude. This woman has looked in the mirror and decided that her worth is not up for negotiation. She is not afraid of silence. She is not weakened by her singleness. In fact, her solitude has made her strong in ways even she does not fully understand. Her soul has been trained by solitude, and her back has been straightened by the weight she carries alone. There is no prison more invisible and yet more powerful than the prison of expectation. A woman who walks alone without a husband walks not only on roads of stone and soil, but through the thickets of questions, the cold stares of assumptions, and the sharp whispers of culture. She is not battling her circumstances. She is battling what the world believes her circumstances should be. It's not her singleness that weighs her down. It is the constant suggestion that she should be somewhere else, with someone else, doing something else, to be seen as enough. This is the quiet war she must fight every day. A war not with violence, but with grace. A war not with fists, but with silence. She walks through traditions that told her she must be chosen to be worthy. She walks past customs that said her time is running out. But even as she hears these voices, she refuses to bow to them. For she understands that expectation can be louder than truth, and conformity is not always the path to peace. Her greatest challenge is not loneliness. It is the burden of being misunderstood. People do not ask her about her dreams, only about her relationship status. They do not question her vision, only her timing. As if her life is a puzzle and the missing piece must be a man. They look at her independence and call it pride. They see her standards and call it stubbornness. But in truth, she has simply chosen not to surrender to pressure. And that choice, that decision to resist the mold, is one of the bravest stands a woman can take. To not marry for appearance, to not settle for the comfort of others, to not define herself through someone else's approval. This is not defiance, it is dignity. And it comes at a cost. She knows the silence of holidays where everyone asks, when will it be your turn? She has heard the sermons that treat singleness as a season to escape. She has smiled politely through the advice of those who think they are helping, not knowing that each suggestion is another reminder that she is not seen for who she is, but for what she lacks. Yet she does not lash out. She does not complain. She does not cry out for sympathy. She simply continues, quietly, faithfully, firmly, because her worth is not up for debate, because she has learned that what society demands is not always what her soul needs, and because she knows that expectation, though loud, is not always wise. Let society speak, let culture insist, let tradition knock at her door. She will listen, but she will not lose herself, for she is not here to please the world. She is here to fulfill her calling, whether she walks with a companion or walks alone. There are sacrifices made in silence that the world will never see. Behind the calm face of the woman who walks alone with no husband, there are battles no one speaks of, because they are fought behind closed doors, in quiet moments, in the stillness of nights when the world is asleep. She does not wear her sacrifices like medals. She carries them like shadows, always with her, but never spoken of. There are moments she longed for comfort, for a shoulder, for someone to share the weight, but she carried it alone. Not because she wanted to, but because there was no one who could understand the price of her path. Her solitude is not a sign of failure. It is the mark of someone who has chosen to carry her destiny, even when it meant losing her comfort. She has turned away from relationships that could have filled the room but emptied her soul. She has walked away from offers that would have brought her company but cost her peace. And each time she made the harder choice, not because she did not desire love, but because she desired truth more. These are the sacrifices people do not see. They see the woman alone, but they do not see the doors she closed behind her. They see her confidence, but they do not see the hours she cried in silence, asking if she made the right decision. They praise her strength, but they do not see how heavy that strength truly is. There are birthdays spent alone, decisions made with no counsel, emergencies faced with only her own hands. And still she stands, still she moves forward, still she believes. That is sacrifice. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that refuses to quit. Her solitude is not merely a choice, it is a testimony that purpose sometimes demands a season of being misunderstood, of being mistaken as too much or too distant. But she knows what they do not know, that her silence is filled with purpose. that her sacrifices are not wasted, they are seeds. Seeds that will grow into wisdom, into legacy, into strength that cannot be shaken. She smiles at the world not because she feels no pain, but because she has learned how to live above it. She speaks with grace not because she has never been broken, but because she has chosen healing over bitterness. Her sacrifices have refined her. Her silence has shaped her. And in that silence, she has met herself. In that solitude, she has met her God. And in those lonely roads, she has found a depth that few ever reach. So while the world counts her losses, she is counting her growth. While others pity her, she is preparing for what only she can carry. Legacy is not always built in public squares or by the hands of those with grand titles. Sometimes it is shaped in the quiet courage of a woman who walks alone with no husband, but with a vision in her heart and a future in her stride. She does not live only for herself. She lives for those who will come after her, for the daughters who are watching, for the sisters who feel forgotten, for the girls growing up in a world that tells them they must belong to someone else before they belong to themselves. She is redefining what it means to leave a legacy, not of wealth, not of fame, but of courage. She shows by her life that a woman's value does not begin when she is chosen by a man. It begins when she chooses to walk in her purpose. There are many who build homes with others, and that is a beautiful thing. But there is another kind of builder, the woman who lays foundations with her own hands, who creates spaces of peace with no one's name beside hers, who raises standards instead of only children, and who plants hope in the hearts of women who thought they were alone in their journey. This woman is a legacy in motion. She may not carry a husband's name, but she carries a calling that cannot be erased. She is not writing history in headlines, but in hearts. The women who see her and say, because she stood, I will not settle. Because she endured, I will not give up. Because she dreamed, I will not stay small. This is how legacy changes when one person refuses to follow the script and instead writes a new chapter. A chapter where womanhood is not defined by who she marries, but by who she becomes. A chapter where her strength is not measured by her family status, but by her moral compass. She may not have passed on her name, but she passes on her fire. And that fire will burn in boardrooms, in pulpits, in schools, in villages, wherever women rise and remember the footsteps of the one who walked before them, footsteps that did not follow, but led, that did not beg, but built, that did not rush into comfort, but ran toward calling. She is not against marriage, nor does she look down on love, but she has learned that legacy is not always about what you gain. It is often about what you refuse to lose. She has refused to lose herself. She has refused to give up her voice, her vision, her value. And in doing so, she has carved a path in the wilderness for others to follow. That is a legacy the world cannot erase. It's not written on paper, but written in lives. Not sealed by rings, but sealed by resolve. She may walk alone, but her walk is crowded with the hopes of those she is lifting by simply being who she is. There comes a time in every person's life when they must decide what is more important, what the world expects of them, or what their soul requires to be at peace. The woman who walks alone with no husband has not failed to find love. She has refused to surrender to pressure. That decision is not one of arrogance. It is one of clarity. She has seen what happens when people rush to please others. She has witnessed women give away their peace just to silence the voices around them. And so she has chosen the harder path, the one that holds her dignity intact. While others run toward comfort, she walks toward calm. She knows the difference between being alone and being free. There is pressure that comes like a flood. It comes from family who ask when she will settle down. It comes from culture that tells her she is incomplete. It comes from the mirror that sometimes whispers lies born from fear and isolation, and yet she has learned to quiet those storms. She does not pretend they are not there. She simply does not allow them to steer her course. She would rather eat in peace at her own table than feast in tension at someone else's. She would rather sit in silence with her soul than sleep beside someone who steals her spirit. This is not pride, it is protection. The protection of her destiny, her calling, and her truth. Many people think she is waiting, but she is not in waiting. She is in living. She is living fully, wholly, richly. She is pouring into her community, building her dreams, serving her purpose. She is not on pause. She is not half a life. She is a full story being written without apology. And in the stillness of her solitude, she has found something far more valuable than attention. She has found alignment, the kind of peace that cannot be bought, that cannot be faked, that cannot be borrowed. She has learned to sleep with peace in her heart instead of settling for company in her bed. The pressure to perform, to please, to conform, it no longer moves her, because she has seen too many people lose themselves trying to gain someone else's approval. She has cried the tears of confusion. She has felt the weight of loneliness. But in those moments, she also discovered her greatest treasure, peace. And now that she has found it, she guards it. No longer will she trade it for validation. No longer will she shrink to fit inside someone else's timeline. Her life is not late, it is on purpose. And if walking alone is the cost of keeping her peace, then she walks with her head high and her heart whole. There is a kind of joy that cannot be explained, a quiet joy that does not shout or perform for attention. It is not rooted in romance, nor is it dependent on validation. It is the joy of a woman who walks alone and still smiles with a full heart. She does not borrow her joy from others. She does not wait for someone to enter her life to begin living. Her joy is her own. It is born of resilience, nurtured by wisdom, and sustained by a deep understanding that happiness is not a gift to be given, but a garden to be grown. She has learned to water her own soul, to sit in rooms by herself and still feel whole, to look at her reflection and feel no lack. This is not pretense. It is peace. People wonder how she finds joy without a partner. But what they fail to see is that her joy was never meant to be outsourced. She has walked through seasons where laughter was rare and comfort was distant, but she came through them not bitter, not broken, but blooming. And now she does not laugh because everything is perfect. She laughs because she has survived what tried to steal her voice, because she has faced the loneliness that others fear and found something sacred within it. Because she knows that true joy is not about having everything, but about needing less and being more. She dances not to be seen, but because her spirit is light. She sings not because someone listens, but because her soul is full. She enjoys sunsets not because they are shared, but because they are beautiful. This is the kind of joy that confuses the world, the kind that does not wait for approval, the kind that flows even when there is no audience. People ask her when she will settle down, when she will find someone to complete her, but they do not see that she is already complete, that she has stopped chasing wholeness in others because she found it within herself. Her joy is not a placeholder for marriage. It is not a disguise. It is real, it is deep, and it is hard-earned. She does not measure her life by events, but by essence. She does not rush to meet someone else's expectation of fulfillment. She is not waiting for a wedding to begin her joy. Her joy began when she stopped apologizing for her journey, when she let go of shame and embraced her story, when she realized that God did not forget her, he formed her for something greater than simply fitting in. And in that realization, she smiled differently. She woke up differently. She walked differently, because now her joy is not attached to a ring or a title. It is rooted in purpose, in truth, in freedom. And no one can take that away from her. So to the woman who walks alone, not by chance, but by conviction, I say this: you are not less, you are not behind, and you are certainly not forgotten. You are the evidence that strength can stand quietly, that beauty does not beg, and that wholeness is not handed to us by another, it is discovered within. You are walking proof that peace is possible without performance, and that legacy is not tied to a last name, but to the impact of a life well lived. Let no one rush you. Let no voice drown out the whisper of your soul. You are not called to follow the path written by another's fear. You are called to rise above the noise, to show a generation what it means to live fully. Even if you walk alone, your journey is not small, it is sacred. Your story is not strange, it is strong. And your solitude is not a sentence, it is a sanctuary where power is born. History will not only remember the women who stood beside great men. It will remember the women who stood alone and by standing lifted others. It will remember the women who refused to fold under pressure, the women who smiled with no audience, the women who dared to be joyful, purposeful, and unshaken without permission. Walk on, with grace, with fire, with faith. The world may not understand your path, but generations will walk in your footsteps because you chose truth over tradition and purpose over pressure. You are not alone. You are leading the way. And that, my friends, is the mark of a truly powerful woman. Thank you.